Marcus Thompson stumbled through the ornate gates of Buckingham Palace, his vision blurred from the countless pints he had consumed at the nearby pub. The 42-year-old construction worker had lost his job 3 weeks ago, and today marked another rejection letter from a potential employer. The alcohol had numbed his disappointment, but it had also unleashed something darker within him. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the palace courtyard as tourists snapped photos and chatted excitedly about the changing of the guard ceremony they had just witnessed. Marcus pushed through the crowd, his heavy boots echoing against the stone pavement. His clothes reeked of stale beer and cigarettes, drawing disgusted looks from well-dressed visitors. Standing at attention near the palace entrance was Guard Johnson, a 28-year-old soldier who had served 3 tours overseas before joining the Queen's Guard. His red tunic was immaculate, his bearskin hat perfectly positioned, and his rifle held with practiced precision. He had been standing motionless for nearly 2 hours, as was his duty, ignoring the heat, the curious stares, and the occasional inappropriate comment from passing tourists. Marcus approached the guard with unsteady steps, his bloodshot eyes fixed on the soldier's stoic face. Something about the guard's discipline and composure irritated him deeply. Here was a man who represented everything Marcus felt he had lost: purpose, respect, and stability. The alcohol amplified his resentment, turning his personal failures into anger directed at an innocent stranger. "Look at you," Marcus slurred, stopping just inches from the guard's face. "Standing there like some kind of toy soldier. Think you're better than everyone else, don't you?" His breath was thick with alcohol as he leaned closer to the motionless guard. Several tourists began to notice the confrontation, some pulling out their phones to record what they initially thought might be an amusing interaction. Guard Johnson's training kicked in immediately. He had dealt with difficult visitors before. Drunk tourists, political protesters, and attention seekers were part of the job. His orders were clear: remain motionless, maintain dignity, and let security handle any serious disturbances. He focused his eyes straight ahead, his breathing steady and controlled, giving no indication that he was even aware of Marcus's presence. The lack of response only fueled Marcus's anger. In his intoxicated state, he interpreted the guard's professionalism as arrogance and disrespect. The crowd around them began to grow larger, with more people stopping to watch the unfolding scene. Some tourists looked uncomfortable, sensing that this was more than just harmless fun, while others seemed entertained by the spectacle. Marcus began pacing back and forth in front of the guard, his movements becoming more erratic and aggressive. "You think you can just ignore me? I'm talking to you," he shouted, his voice carrying across the courtyard. Security cameras captured every moment, and palace security began moving discreetly toward the scene, following protocol to assess the situation before intervening. The construction worker's frustration reached a boiling point as he realized his taunts were having no effect on the disciplined soldier. His personal demons, amplified by alcohol, began to manifest in increasingly erratic behavior. What had started as drunken rambling was quickly escalating into something more serious, setting the stage for events that would soon spiral completely out of control. Unknown to Marcus, his actions were being watched not only by growing crowds of tourists, but also by plainclothes security officers who were already radioing for backup. The situation was about to take a dramatic turn that would change both men's lives forever, as Marcus's intoxicated state led him down a path from which there would be no easy return. The crowd continued to grow as Marcus's behavior became increasingly aggressive. Children tugged at their parents' sleeves, asking why the man was being so mean to the soldier. Some families quickly moved away from the scene, sensing danger, while others remained transfixed by the unfolding drama. The atmosphere in the courtyard shifted from cheerful tourism to uncomfortable tension. Marcus began making crude gestures at Guard Johnson, waving his arms wildly and stumbling closer to the soldier's position. "You deaf or something? I said look at me when I'm talking to you." His voice cracked with rage and desperation. The alcohol had stripped away his inhibitions completely, revealing years of built-up frustration and anger that had nothing to do with the innocent guard standing before him. Security Officer Williams, a veteran of 20 years protecting the royal family, spoke quietly into his radio as he observed from a distance. "We have a code yellow situation at the main entrance. Intoxicated male, mid-40s, becoming increasingly aggressive with Guard Johnson, requesting immediate backup and medical standby." He knew from experience that situations like this could escalate quickly, especially when alcohol was involved. Guard. Johnson's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, the only sign that he was aware of the growing threat. His military training had prepared him for combat zones and dangerous situations, but this was different. He couldn't defend himself or even move without breaking protocol and potentially losing his position. He had to trust that security would intervene before things went too far. Marcus suddenly reached into his jacket pocket, causing several tourists to gasp and step back. Security officers immediately tensed, hands moving toward their equipment. But Marcus only pulled out his empty wallet, throwing it at the guard's feet in a gesture of contempt. "Look at this. Empty. You know why? Because people like you get everything handed to them while the rest of us get nothing." The wallet struck Guard Johnson's polished boot, but he didn't flinch. His eyes remained fixed straight ahead, though inside he felt a mixture of sympathy and growing concern for his own safety. He had seen men like Marcus in the military, good people broken by circumstances beyond their control, their pain manifesting as misplaced anger. "My grandfather fought in World War II, Marcus shouted, his voice becoming hoarse. "He died for this country, and what did it get him? What did it get me? Nothing." Tears began streaming down his weathered face, mixing with the sweat from his alcohol-induced flush. The crowd watched in uncomfortable silence as his rant revealed deeper pain beneath the aggressive exterior. A young girl, no more than 8 years old, tugged on her mother's dress and whispered loudly enough for nearby people to hear, "Mummy, why is that man so sad and angry?" Her innocent question seemed to capture what many adults were thinking but afraid to say. This wasn't just about a drunk man causing trouble. It was about someone whose life had spiraled out of control. Security Officer Williams decided it was time to act. He began walking slowly toward Marcus, speaking in a calm, authoritative voice. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step away from the guard and come with me. We can talk about whatever's bothering you, but this isn't the place for it." Marcus whipped around to face the approaching officer, his eyes wild with rage and desperation. "Another one! Another toy soldier coming to protect the precious guard!" The situation was reaching a critical point, with Marcus's behavior becoming more unpredictable by the minute. What he would do next would determine whether this incident ended with a simple arrest or something much worse. The tension in the courtyard was palpable as everyone watched and waited, unsure of what would happen next. Guard Johnson continued to stand at attention, but his muscles were coiled and ready, knowing that his training might soon be put to the ultimate test. Marcus turned his attention back to Guard Johnson with renewed fury, completely ignoring Security Officer Williams' attempts to de-escalate the situation. The alcohol had pushed him past the point of rational thinking, and the crowd's presence only seemed to fuel his need for attention and validation of his pain. "You want to know what's really pathetic?" Marcus screamed, his face now inches from the guards. "You're just a decoration, a tourist attraction. While real men like me break our backs building this country, you play dress-up for rich people's entertainment." Spittle flew from his mouth as he spoke, landing on the guard's pristine uniform. Guard Johnson's training was being tested to its absolute limits. Every instinct told him to respond, to defend himself and his honor, but his duty required him to remain motionless. He could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes watching him, judging his reaction. His reputation, his career, and the dignity of his regiment all depended on maintaining his composure despite the increasingly vile provocation. The crowd's reaction began to shift as Marcus's behavior crossed from merely inappropriate to genuinely disturbing. Several people started backing away, pulling their children closer. Others continued filming, though some began to look uncomfortable about recording what was clearly a man's complete breakdown in public. Marcus suddenly grabbed the guard's rifle barrel, trying to push it aside. This physical contact immediately elevated the threat level, and Security Officer Williams broke into a run toward them. "Sir, release the weapon immediately and step back," he shouted, while two additional security officers appeared from different directions, converging on the scene. The moment Marcus touched his weapon, something shifted in Guard Johnson's stance. While he couldn't abandon his post or break protocol, his grip tightened on his rifle, and his entire body became alert for any attempt to actually take the weapon. The crowd sensed the change in atmosphere. This was no longer just a verbal confrontation. "Look at me!" Marcus shrieked, shaking the rifle barrel. "I said look at me! I'm a human being! I deserve respect!" His voice broke as years have accumulated. Rejection, disappointment, and failure poured out in a torrent of misdirected rage. The guard's weapon became a symbol of everything he felt powerless against: authority, stability, and purpose. A middle-aged woman in the crowd called out, "Someone help that poor man!" But most people were too shocked or frightened to know how to respond. The situation had evolved far beyond typical tourist antics into something genuinely dangerous and unpredictable. Security Officer Williams reached the pair just as Marcus released the rifle and stumbled backward. "Sir, you're under arrest for assaulting a member of the Queen's Guard and threatening behavior," Williams announced, producing handcuffs from his belt. But Marcus wasn't finished with his rampage. "Arrest me? For what? Talking to your precious toy soldier?" Marcus laughed bitterly, wiping tears and sweat from his face. "I've got nothing left to lose anyway. Nothing." His words carried a chilling finality that made everyone present realize this situation was far from over. The construction worker's eyes darted around the crowd, taking in all the phones recording his humiliation, all the disgusted faces staring at him like he was some kind of monster. In his alcohol-clouded mind, these people represented everyone who had ever rejected him, looked down on him, or made him feel worthless. What Marcus did next would shock even the most prepared security personnel and traumatize innocent bystanders, who had simply come to see the palace. His complete loss of control was about to reach a level that would make headlines around the world and forever change how people remembered this day at Buckingham Palace. Marcus suddenly lurched toward Guard Johnson and did something that horrified everyone watching. He spat directly in the soldier's face, the saliva running down the guard's cheek and onto his pristine red tunic. The crowd gasped collectively, with several people crying out in shock and disgust. Children started crying, and parents quickly covered their eyes. But Marcus wasn't finished. In a moment of complete moral collapse, he began unbuttoning his pants in front of hundreds of tourists, including families with young children. "You want to see what I think of your precious monarchy?" he shouted, his words slurring together. Security Officer Williams rushed forward, but Marcus pushed him away with surprising strength born of desperation and rage. The scene descended into chaos as people screamed and ran in different directions. Parents scooped up their children and fled the courtyard, while others stood frozen in shock at what they were witnessing. The sound of police sirens grew louder as emergency services responded to multiple calls from horrified witnesses. Guard Johnson, still maintaining his position despite the assault and public indecency occurring just feet away, felt a single tear roll down his cheek, not from the physical discomfort, but from the profound sadness of watching another human being destroy himself so completely. His training had prepared him for many things, but not for this level of public degradation and moral breakdown. 3 additional security officers arrived simultaneously, tackling Marcus to the ground before he could complete his intended act of public indecency. The struggle was violent and prolonged as Marcus fought against the officers with the desperate strength of someone who felt he had absolutely nothing left to lose. "Get off me! I'm not done! I'm not done showing you what I think!" Marcus screamed as they wrestled him into handcuffs. His pants were partially pulled down and his shirt was torn in the struggle. The sight was both pathetic and deeply disturbing. A man who had completely lost all sense of dignity and self-respect. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a psychiatrist who had been visiting the palace with her family, approached Security Officer Williams. "That man needs immediate medical attention," she said urgently. "This isn't just drunken behavior. He's having a complete psychological breakdown. He could hurt himself or others if he doesn't get help soon." The crowd that remained was a mixture of shocked tourists, concerned citizens, and, unfortunately, some people who continued filming the man's humiliation for social media. The contrast between those showing genuine concern and those treating it as entertainment highlighted the complex nature of public spectacle in the modern age. Marcus was finally subdued and partially clothed by the officers, but he continued, ranting incoherently about respect, dignity, and the unfairness of life. His words became increasingly disconnected from reality as the alcohol and emotional trauma took their toll on his mental state. Guard Johnson, who had witnessed the entire horrific episode while maintaining his post, was visibly shaken. Though he hadn't moved from his position, his commanding officer quietly approached and whispered that he would be relieved of duty for the day. The young soldier nodded almost imperceptibly, grateful that his ordeal was finally coming to an end. As Marcus was loaded into an ambulance under police guard, still shouting incomprehensibly about injustice and respect, the full weight of what had occurred began to settle over everyone present. This wasn't just a story about a drunk man causing trouble. It was a tragic demonstration of how mental health, economic desperation, and personal failure could combine to destroy a human being in the most public way possible. The aftermath of Marcus's actions would ripple far beyond that single afternoon, affecting not only his own life but the lives of everyone who witnessed his complete moral collapse in front of one of Britain's most sacred symbols of duty and honor. The news of Marcus's shocking behavior spread like wildfire across social media and news outlets within hours. Videos of the incident taken by tourists went viral with millions of views, though most platforms quickly removed the more graphic content involving his attempted public indecency. The hashtag #OurBuckinghamPalaceIncident began trending worldwide, sparking intense debates about mental health, public behavior, and social media ethics. At St. Mary's Hospital, Marcus lay strapped to a bed in the psychiatric emergency ward, heavily sedated after becoming violent with medical staff. Dr. Elizabeth Harper, the attending psychiatrist, reviewed his file with growing concern. Blood tests revealed not only dangerous levels of alcohol, but also traces of antidepressants that he had apparently stopped taking weeks ago without medical supervision. His sister Jennifer received the phone call she had been dreading for months. "Mrs. Wilson, this is about your brother Marcus Thompson. He's been arrested and hospitalized following an incident at Buckingham Palace." Jennifer closed her eyes and sank into her kitchen chair. She had tried repeatedly to get Marcus help after he lost his job, but he had refused all offers of support and pushed away everyone who cared about him. Guard Johnson returned to his small apartment near the barracks, still in shock from the day's events. His uniform, stained with Marcus's saliva, lay in a bag that would be sent for professional cleaning. He sat on the edge of his bed, replaying the incident in his mind. Despite his training and discipline, he couldn't shake the image of Marcus's desperate, tear-filled eyes, the look of a man who had lost all hope. The palace's public relations team worked overtime to manage the fallout. Press Secretary Amanda Richards faced a room full of reporters, all asking variations of the same questions about security protocols and the guards' remarkable restraint. Guard Johnson demonstrated exceptional professionalism under extremely difficult circumstances, she stated. His conduct exemplifies the highest standards of the Queen's Guard. Meanwhile, social media exploded with polarized reactions. Some praised Guard Johnson's discipline and self-control, calling him a hero for maintaining his post despite the assault and humiliation. Others focused on Marcus, with mental health advocates arguing that the incident highlighted society's failure to support struggling individuals. The more disturbing aspect was the number of people who shared the videos for entertainment, turning Marcus's breakdown into viral content. Dr. Mitchell, the psychiatrist who had witnessed the incident, found herself unable to stop thinking about Marcus's condition. She contacted the hospital and offered to provide a professional assessment. "This man needs comprehensive psychiatric evaluation and long-term treatment," she told Dr. Harper during their phone conversation. "What we witnessed wasn't just drunken behavior. It was a complete psychotic break." At the police station, Detective Inspector Robert Clark reviewed the charges against Marcus. Assault on an officer, public indecency, disturbing the peace, and threatening behavior. The list was substantial. But after viewing the security footage and reading witness statements, he began to see a pattern of mental health crisis rather than criminal intent. Marcus's employer from his previous job, construction manager Dave Stevens, saw the news coverage and felt a wave of guilt. He remembered firing Marcus for showing up late and seeming distracted, but now realized those might have been signs of depression and mental health struggles. "Maybe if I'd talked to him instead of just letting him go," Dave confided to his wife that evening. The incident sparked a broader conversation about mental health support for unemployed individuals and the pressures of modern society. Mental health charities saw a spike in donations and calls to their helplines as people reflected on how easily someone could spiral into Marcus's situation. Guard Johnson, despite being offered time off, requested to return to duty the next day. His sergeant was concerned about potential trauma, but the young soldier insisted he was fine. "That man needs help, not punishment," he told his commanding officer. "I just keep thinking about what drove him to that point. It could happen to anyone if life hits them hard enough." As Marcus slowly regained consciousness in the hospital, heavily medicated and restrained, he had no memory of what he had done. The last thing he remembered was being rejected for another job and heading to the pub. The full horror of his actions would soon become clear, but for now, he was just a broken man wondering why he was in a hospital bed with police officers outside his door. 3 weeks after the incident, Marcus sat in a secure psychiatric facility, finally sober and medicated properly for the first time in months. When Dr. Harper showed him the news footage of his behavior at Buckingham Palace, he broke down completely, unable to believe he was capable of such actions. "That's not me," he whispered repeatedly, tears streaming down his face. "I would never do something like that. I'm not a monster." The legal proceedings moved slowly as mental health experts evaluated Marcus's condition. His lawyer, appointed by the court, argued that his actions were the result of untreated depression, alcohol abuse, and a complete psychological breakdown rather than criminal intent. The prosecution, while sympathetic to his mental health issues, maintained that his behavior was so extreme and public that consequences were necessary. Guard Johnson made an unexpected decision that surprised everyone involved in the case. He requested permission to visit Marcus in the psychiatric facility. Against the advice of his superiors and legal counsel, he felt compelled to face the man who had assaulted him. "I need to understand what happened," he explained to his commanding officer. "And maybe he needs to know that I don't hate him for it." The meeting between the two men was arranged under strict supervision. When Marcus saw the guard enter the visiting room in civilian clothes, he immediately broke down in tears. "I'm so sorry," he sobbed. "I don't even remember what I did, but they showed me the videos. I'm so ashamed. You didn't deserve any of that. Nobody deserved to see that." Guard Johnson sat across from Marcus, seeing not the aggressive drunk from that day, but a broken human being struggling with demons he couldn't control. "I've been thinking about you," the soldier said quietly. "About what you must have been, going through to reach that point. I wanted you to know that I forgive you, and I hope you can get the help you need." Marcus's sister Jennifer had been working tirelessly to understand her brother's condition and get him proper treatment. She testified at his sentencing hearing about his military father's death, his struggles with depression, and his downward spiral after losing his job. "This isn't who my brother really is," she pleaded with the judge. "He's sick, and he needs treatment, not just punishment." The judge, after reviewing extensive psychiatric reports and considering the unique circumstances of the case, sentenced Marcus to 2 years in a secure mental health facility, followed by 5 years of supervised probation with mandatory counseling and community service. "While your actions were inexcusable and deeply disturbing," Judge Harrison stated, "it's clear that you were suffering from severe mental illness that went untreated. Society is better served by your rehabilitation than by pure punishment." The ES incident led to significant changes in palace security protocols and mental health awareness training for guards and security personnel. Guard Johnson became an advocate for better mental health support for both military personnel and the general public, often speaking about his experience and the importance of understanding rather than simply condemning those who struggle. Marcus began his long journey toward recovery, participating in intensive therapy and group counseling sessions. He started working with other patients, helping them understand that rock bottom could be a foundation for rebuilding rather than an ending. His therapist noted remarkable progress as he began to confront the underlying issues that had led to his breakdown. 1 year later, Marcus wrote a letter that was published in several newspapers, apologizing publicly for his actions and thanking Guard Johnson for his forgiveness. He had been sober for 8 months and was slowly rebuilding relationships with his family. "I destroyed my life in one afternoon," he wrote, "but I'm learning that destruction can be the beginning of reconstruction if you're willing to do the hard work of healing." Guard Johnson kept the letter in his wallet and continued his duties, with a deeper understanding of human fragility and the importance of compassion. He often thought about how a single moment of crisis had taught him more about humanity than years of military training ever could. The story of Marcus and Guard Johnson became a powerful example of how mental health crises can affect anyone, and how forgiveness and understanding can begin the healing process even after the most shocking and shameful behavior. Their unlikely connection reminded everyone involved that behind every headline, there are real people struggling with very human problems that deserve compassion rather than just condemnation.